What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Down Once More. Matt here, and as promised, today we are talking about Rent, specifically Rent in concert, and then at the end, just some Rent in general. There's multiple film versions out there to watch. What's my recommendations, my thoughts on each? We've done an in-depth review of Rent, I think episode 3 of the pod, so still very green. It's over 100 episodes ago, so go back and check that out if you want Rayleigh and I, both of our full thoughts on it. But let's get into Rent in concert. I wasn't quite sure what to expect going into this, except that it was the music of Rent, but with a full symphonic orchestra. I had a little bit of apprehension because typically Rent is just played with the 6-piece band on stage. And with the symphonic orchestra and just the different arrangements and pieces, instruments that are coming to play there, I was curious if it was going to lose a little bit of its energy and, as weird as it sounds to say, grunginess, grittiness that makes Rent what it is. And I have to get out of the way. Well, the symphonic orchestra was beautiful. There were some numbers that it almost got a little bit distracting, and I do feel like it took away a little bit of what it was. I saw Rent live, the actual tour, a few years ago, and I have to say that experience I preferred. But the vocalists featured in this performance were absolutely fantastic. And I'll get into the cast a little bit and kind of my thoughts there and what the standouts were to me. But this production, this Rent in concert, is directed by Sammy Cannell, who, fun fact, was on Forbes 30 Under 30 in Hollywood, as well as Variety's 10 Broadway stars to watch. It was directed very well. The way that they still tried to bring some energy with the vocalists on stage, just standing behind music stands instead of having the whole stage and set to work with, they still interacted with each other, fed off each other really well, that it did bring a little bit of that Rent energy to the production. This show is conducted by Sarah Hicks, who did an absolutely fantastic job being there on stage, introducing the show. Just kind of a different vibe is having the overture to open the show that had the pieces from songs throughout the production. It was beautiful with the full orchestra. So that was a highlight that just kicked it off and opened it out. I thought that was beautiful. I thought that was fantastic to get that. Just kind of a callback to musicals of old with you get that overture, which doesn't, it exists in some form in a lot of musicals, but especially more modern musicals, I don't know, it doesn't hit quite the same as you go back and watch those old movie musicals like West Side Story. You've got a 8-minute overture leading into the production, and some of those that tells the story of the musical before you get into it. And I'm a big overture fan. So when you're watching it and you're just seeing the credits go and you're like, is this going to get to the movie? And sometimes my attention span can be distracted and pulled, but I do think overtures are beautiful and a beautiful way to tell the story of the musical before you get into it. So that was fantastic. There were a few technical issues out of the way. So Joanne's mic had just a tinniness to it. It sounded like she was kind of talking into a tin can through a string for the first act, was a little bit disappointing, but they got those kinks worked out for the second round. It was a little bit different. While all the songs remained and were there and relatively unchanged, there were a little bit of small tweaks to the dialogue in between things. I did like that some of the vocalists made some choices to kind of make it their own a little bit while still paying homage, but not seeming like you're just trying to do a copy and paste of what's come before with that original Broadway cast. And so let's get into the cast. Mark is played by A.J. Shively, who received a Tony nom for his work on Paradise Square. Mark was probably the most energetic cast member on stage. And so I thought AJ did a fantastic job in this role, just kind of the little bit of nerdy, awkward film student vibes of Mark. Fantastic. No notes. Crystal Lucas Perry was Joanne. Like I said, unfortunately, her mic had some issues in that first act, which was a bummer and really detracted from Tango Maureen, and her voice didn't get to shine through as much, and especially when we saw some of those notes in the second act would Take Me or Leave Me, I was just so sad that we didn't get to experience the full just power of her voice in the first act. And then Sydney DuPont was Collins. This is my first like key standout. Sydney DuPont, also Tony nom for work on Paradise Square, and originated a role in Paradise Square. But Sydney DuPont had an absolutely beautiful voice. Some of the runs he went on, and in I'll Cover You Reprise, which is just Collins' real time to shine, it was so powerful, fantastic. One of the loudest applauses of the night. Fantastic. Jimmy Herod played Angel. Jimmy Herod was a finalist on America's Got Talent and earned a Golden Buzzer from Sofia Vergara. So fun fact on Jimmy Herod, and came back in the All-Star season next year. Fantastic voice as Angel. Angel's character, I do feel like, loses a little bit of power and energy in a concert setting when you don't have, with Today for You, Tomorrow for Me, the dancing and everything that goes into that character. But Jimmy Herod, fantastic voice, played the role so well. And Jimmy and Sydney had interactions with Collins and Angel that was really good. Some like full level acting, like they're on stage doing the actual production instead of just a concert, minus the dancing, as I mentioned. So one of the big names with it is Mary-Kate Moore as Maureen. Now, she's native Nebraskan, so coming back and doing this concert in Nebraska was fantastic. And she's had roles. She was an understudy to Sarah Bareilles on Into the Woods on Broadway, and did win a Broadway World LA Award as Best Featured Actress for work as Fantine in Les Mis on the national tour. So one of the best Maureens that I have heard. Like, the Maureen is such a unique role, and especially with the first introduction really being the performance, which they played into on stage. So the Maureen came out, did Rent, and then left the stage and was off stage. Chair was empty because they had, have a picture on the YouTube, but how it was set up, they had the orchestra behind on stage. Then they had the cast with music stands for there, and then the chairs behind. So when they weren't performing, sitting, go up to the music stands, raise it, sing your part, say your part, go back, sit down. And Maureen actually entered going after Christmas Bells, going right into the performance. And Mary-Kate Moore did a fantastic job. And she really did as Maureen. Those notes in the performance were just, whew, that was probably the loudest applause of the night. Like I said, Sydney DuPont, one of the loudest. The notes that Mary-Kate Moore was hitting, and playing to the crowd a little bit too, which you always got to give credit to that when they're getting the crowd to moo with Maureen. She's like, I know you Nebraskans know what a cow sounds like. And it was like, got quite a few chuckles, so played into it. Fantastic voice, fantastic Maureen, such a powerful voice, so good. Now, Roger was played by Will Hastreiter. I may be mispronouncing his last name, who is local here from Nebraska. So this concert pulled together people who had been on Broadway, professional performers, and then a lot of local, like, emerging talent that a lot of their credits are more like community playhouses, theaters, that type of thing, not big, like, national tours, Broadway productions. But Will Hastreiter as Roger had a fantastic and powerful voice. Like, Roger hits some notes and has some power in some of the songs, especially One Day Glory, One Song Glory, One Day Glory, or Just Glory, I think is the actual title of it. But like, no faltering in his voice, so good, fantastic. Another kind of emerging local talent was Isagat as Mimi, and just such a beautiful voice, like so powerful as well. The way her and Will played off each other in Will You Light My Candle, just so great, and actually crushed Out Tonight too. I feel like Out Tonight is a song that you have to bring your own energy to, and make it your own. And they're like, Daphne Rubin Vega, very unique voice, so kind of originating that role of Mimi on Broadway. And then Rosario Dawson in the movie version, and there were some things behind the scenes with that, and of course had to deal with like Goodbye Love getting cut from the movie, and then Renee Elise Goldsberry played Mimi in the filmed Broadway version of Rent, the anniversary performance that was filmed. And so there's been a lot of powerful voices and a lot of unique takes on Mimi, and fantastic, so good. Isagat, kudos to you. And then I'm gonna mispronounce this because I couldn't find a pronunciation of it. Rushida Kazanchi as Benny, New York-based actor and musician. It had some like interesting takes on line deliveries of some of Benny's songs and lines, but I thought he sounded fantastic, worked really well together, especially in You'll See. You'll See is actually one of my favorites from this. I have a lot of favorites from Rent. Rent is a musical that is very near and dear to me. It's one that really kind of reignited my love of musicals. Like I had some growing up, but especially like musical theater wasn't very prevalent for me in my life as an adult until what kind of sparked this podcast. Rayleigh had posted a video. We knew each other from back in the high school days, hadn't really connected. She had posted a video like singing along to Maureen's performance, which I don't know if that reel still exists on Instagram, but it was well done, and it made me think, what the hell is this movie? Because I didn't know Rent at all. Raised conservative. Rent was not one that was on the docket on viewing growing up, but so good. And so that got me to check out Rent and the music of it, and then I fell in love with it almost instantly. And then Rayleigh and I started talking about it and talking more, and then that's how the podcast eventually came to be. And if you pay attention to our podcast graphics, the logo, I'm wearing Mark's sweater in our graphic image. So, and Rayleigh is wearing Mimi's boots and tights. So we got some nods to Rent in our logo design because it's part of what brought this to be, and one of the most loved musicals by both of us and just people in general. It's such a fantastic musical. And then the ensemble played a number of different roles. Samara Follett, Elise Anderson, Evan Jennings, and Quinlan Hunt, all kind of local emerging talents, and with, like I said, not a ton of things to their resume, but man, did they have some great voices, and each had their kind of moments to shine throughout the show. Huge standout there, though, was Samara Follett had the kind of female vocalist solo parts in Seasons of Love and absolutely fucking crushed the high notes, and just, it was so good. So good. Another thing where the audience just fantastic, roaring applause throughout it and cheers. It was beautiful. It was fantastic. So everyone on this cast and the vocalists for this concert were fantastic and did a great job in what they were doing. But here's my but. Unfortunately, like I said, some of the numbers, like especially La Vie Boheme, which I get, my first introduction to La Vie Boheme was in the movie version. So you do have some additional things with the arrangement that are pulled in that make it bigger than it can be with a 6-piece band on stage. But La Vie Boheme, when you take away the dancing, you take away that level of energy from that song, it did seem to be a little bit neutered. Like that was really the only one that I'm like, I really feel like the orchestra is detracting from it. There was one other one that now I'm not going to be able to remember which one it was, but there were a couple others that just were kind of like, that was an interesting way to take it. Oh, Contact, kind of unique number as well, was cut from the movie version, and it's the like most jarring one. I feel like I need to kind of give a disclaimer when people who aren't familiar with Rent go to watch Rent for the first time based off my recommendation. So that one, just how that is orchestrated was a little bit odd to me, an interesting choice, but it is what it is. You're going to do with it. But this concert, I honestly don't know if this concert is a touring thing or not. I would assume so because of some of the talent that they pull in locals to kind of work through it, emerging talent. Because I was pretty surprised that Roger and Mimi, two very kind of prominent characters in this, were played by relatively local kind of emerging talent, and that they stepped up to the task and did fantastic. So if you have it's a whole different experience. I feel like everyone should experience Rent live in some shape or another. Granted, I'd say the actual musical, the production, the stage set, I'd recommend that. But this concert is also a beautiful way and a new way to experience it. I was very Rent heavy this past week. As I talked in last week's episode, I rewatched the movie version and the filmed Broadway version from the anniversary, kind of to refamiliarize myself with it. There's parts of it, like there's songs from Rent that are on my normal playlist or my musical playlist. So like some of my favorites are Another Day, the I'll Cover You reprise, Goodbye Love, and then the title track, Rent. Just very powerful and just fantastic musical theater songs, and really just songs in general. Ones I feel like are kind of like sneaky underrated because they're not as well known on there, and they don't take place in the movie. So if you only know Rent from the movie, you're not gonna know, are Christmas Bells and Halloween. And I just like Christmas Bells, everything going on it can be a little bit difficult to follow at times, but I just love kind of that chaos, the bustle of what's going on the street leading up to Maureen's performance, and just all the different pieces and where all the characters are at with it. I really enjoy it. So I don't really have any other notes on the concert except Sydney Dupont was fantastic. Mary-Kate Moore was fantastic. Issa Gott was fantastic. And Samara Follett absolutely crushed it. I would not be surprised if we see Samara Follett and Issa Gott, those kind of like local emerging talents, in national tours someday in the future. I know there's so much talent out there, but their voices were fantastic. Their performances were powerful. But absolutely a fantastic experience. I would recommend people go check it out. I love the music of Rent. I think this can also be a more accessible way to get people, I want to say accessible way to get people into Rent who might be a little more reserved, and the movie and the musical can seem like a lot. But that's not really accurate, because you're just getting the vocals and you're not getting as much as the play of what's happening. So you have to be paying more attention if you're not familiar with the songs. That was something I figured out, because when I first discovered Rent, for me, like I'm not the one who discovered Rent, obviously, but when I first fell in love with it, it was playing at our theater pretty soon after that, like a month after I first discovered the musical and found it, like at the Live, where I now have my Broadway season tickets, so we go to see them on the national tours. And so there's a production of Rent there, so we went to see it live, took my wife to it then. We were dating at the time, and she, not really her thing. Granted, I'm a lot more into musicals than she is, and going into it relatively blind is hard to do. Like, there's so much that's going on in it, and there's so much subtext in the lyrics that you have to be paying attention with the stuff like it's clearly stated in the words and the lyrics, like the dialogue and the lyrics, but it can be difficult to pick up just because there's so much that's happening and going on. And we went there was something a little off with the mix, where sometimes you'd lose some of the dialogue. Which seems to be a regular occurrence with this theater, which is unfortunate, but that's also because I'm usually going on the first night that it's here. But this week, she's like, well, we're going to go to the concert. I want to watch the movie. I'm like, well, let's watch the film Broadway one first, because it's the most complete version. I think it's the best version out there that you can watch. We watched that. She's like, I feel like there's things that I was missing. We then went and watched the movie, and she kind of gave a clearer picture, which I think is accurate. The movie version is a lot more accessible to people who Rent is your first, accessible to people and a good first introduction to Rent. Yes, it's missing some numbers. Yes, they changed sung lines into dialogue lines, which is infuriating to me, having seen the Broadway version and thinking that's the superior version. So like knowing that those lines are supposed to be sung, hearing them just said in dialogue feels awkward and weird and wrong. But if you don't already have those preconceived notions, you're not gonna pick up on that. And when like I saw the movie version first, and that's what caused me to fall in love with it. So the movie version obviously has its merits, and there's things that, like I said, you can pick up on what's happening a little bit clearer in that. So I feel like a good way to do it is to watch the movie version, because then you're getting to see some beautiful stuff. You're getting to see that original Broadway cast, minus Daphne Rubin Vega, as Mimi is replaced with Rosario Dawson, and the actress who played Joanne. I forget who originated on Broadway, but it's in the movie is played by Tracy Toms, who also played it in the filmed Broadway. Played Joanne in the filmed Broadway version. So you get some fantastic replacements in there who do a great job, but the rest you get Anthony Rapp, you get Idina Menzel. It's just, you get Jesse Collins, and it's not Jesse Collins, it's Jesse L. Martin who plays Collins. Stupid Matt. But you get those performances still, and you're getting to see that, and that's as close as you're able to get now to that original Broadway cast. Besides, obviously, the original Broadway cast recording, but visually speaking, seeing the energy they put into those performances, that's the closest that you can get now. But the film Broadway version is so good. So after you see the movie, I would encourage you to find that, check it out. It was on YouTube for a while for free. If not, it's available on Vudu, Amazon to rent, buy digitally. And you get to pick up those songs that you miss. Like the movie version cuts Goodbye Love short, and you lose some of to me, my favorite part of Goodbye Love isn't when they're at the funeral fighting with each other. It's afterward with Mark and Roger's interactions as Roger's about to head out. You have Mimi and Roger's interactions as he's leaving her because he can't deal with this, where she's dealing with her drug addiction and all of that, and he's just projecting. Now granted, there's some stuff going on with Benny still, but he's still just projecting that and just assuming that's all the Benny stuff that kind of then pushes her to Benny, and how their relationship's gone through like Without You, from earlier on to now, like that when he's leaving, and just Mimi's still just that love and longing for him, and he loves her too, but just doesn't want to be hurt again, doesn't want to see all of this happen again after he had his girlfriend who had AIDS die. Because everyone in the if you're not familiar with Rent, let's go back. Let's do some backstory. We're talking about the different versions of it. So Rent is a rock musical. It's loosely based on the 1896 opera La Boheme. And so Jonathan Larson worked on that with, I literally just looked this up before it, but originally was working with Billy Aronson on the project, and then in like 1991, I think it's like he started in either 88 or 91. He started working with Billy Aronson on it, and then wanted to eventually make it his own. So the original concept was by Billy Aronson. Jonathan Larson came on board, then ended up kind of taking it on his own. And then made it into what it is. And if you're not familiar with it, they did an original workshop in 1993 where it needed a lot of work to the book and structure issues. And then in 1996, they were set to begin performances on January 26th. And then the morning of January 25th, Jonathan Larson died. He had an issue and he died. He never got to see Rent go on and see the success that it had while he was alive. It's just really tragic story. And so that the very first performance of Rent at that workshop, besides the original workshop in 93, but in the run that then went to Broadway, was done as just like a seated concert performance of it. So similar to what I saw. That was some of the original performances of Rent, just kind of in mourning and honoring Jonathan Larson. And then that transferred to Broadway later that year on April 29th. So just a couple months of being at the workshop. I think they did 150 performances and then transferred to Broadway, and instantly had success and just became just kind of a cultural and musical theater phenomenon for being just so unique, telling a very powerful story. They did a documentary on Jonathan Larson's kind of life and creation of Rent called No Day But Today. It's on the DVD of their movie version of Rent. You can also find it in full on YouTube. It's about 2 hours long. I think at one point Rayleigh and I talking about that documentary on here, which I think will still happen at some point. We just need to figure out when. But it's such a powerful musical, and it's so important to so many people's lives. The story that it tells, just the representation and depictions of all these different people and the struggles. It's a very real story. And I talked about earlier how Another Day is one of my favorites from it. And it was always one that I'd listened to, but until listening to it and seeing the different performances of it this week, it really just stuck out to me and just climbed to the top of my favorites. Just read some lyrics from it, which I hate doing it because it sounds stupid. But when Mimi's just singing to Roger, she's like, "There is no future, there is no past. I live this moment as my last. There's only us, there's only this. Forget regret or life is yours to miss. No other road, no other way, no day but today." And that's the story of Rent is, well, there's a lot of things and themes, but one of it is there's no day but today. You can't do anything to change your past. You can only do so much to control your future. Just focusing on that or worrying about that in fear of Roger, just where he's living locked in, just worried of dying from AIDS, and which is fair. These are fair things, but these people that are still living your life and just focusing on living today like it's your last, and seizing opportunities, not taking anything for granted. And it's a very beautiful and powerful story. And then at the end of Another Day, when just Mimi's singing and Roger's going at the same time, and it's beautiful. But the closing of Another Day, she's like, "There's only now, there's only here, give in to love or live in fear." The fear or love thing, very powerful and very important things to Jonathan Larson, right? That's one of the key themes of Tick Tick Boom, which is a kind of semi-autobiographical music that he wrote that is Andrew Garfield did a fantastic job portraying Jonathan Larson in it in the movie version, which another one of my favorite musicals. And that's what's on a necklace, Fear or Love, and You Will Be Found. It says those two things. This necklace has come up multiple episodes lately, but that, are you letting yourself be led by fear or love, are the lyrics, well, the words that are said in the movie, and the lyrics from Louder Than Words are fear or love, don't say the answer, actions speak louder than words. And that's what it's an important theme throughout these lyrics. So here, the give in to love or live in fear. There's a lot more nuance, yes, but it boils down to those two elements in these musicals, and that's the important thing. And so Mimi says, closing out that, those bars, the segment says, "No other past, no other way, no day but today, no day but today." I also realized the irony that I said, I hate in the movie version how they take the sung lines and just speak them as dialogue. It just is so infuriating, and that's exactly what I did. But trust me, that is better than me trying to sing them. So, Rent, this past week with these versions, just kind of immersing myself in Rent, just kind of cements it in my top 5. It is just such a beautiful musical and it is so powerful. And I feel like if you haven't, you need to check out Rent. It's so good. The story that it tells, and watch the documentary, Jonathan Larson's life and just how Rent came to be is a beautiful story, and it's just its own fantastic story on its own. So check it out. That's going to do it for this week's episode. Next week, the plan is for Brad and I to be talking about Kneecap. It is a musical movie. It is a mostly true story about an Irish language rap group that used it as a form of rebellion. And it is, I just finished watching it this afternoon. Spoiler alert, I thought it was fantastic. But you're going to need to lock in. There's a lot of subtitles on it, and the Irish accents are heavy, so I had subtitles thrown on the whole way through to make sure I knew it. So lock in. It's on Netflix, streaming now. If you don't have Netflix, you can rent it or buy it on digital. This movie was fantastic. We'll be getting into it, and eventually, like, I don't know how award seasons work, but I have seen clips from Emilia Perez, and I'm like, what is this movie? So that will be watched at some point. But Emilia Perez winning as many things as it did, and Kneecap not being nominated in like foreign language film or like going up against that, or I don't know. I know it has in some things, like in the BAFTAs, it's nominated in Best Foreign Language Film. But wow, stuff. Highly recommend you check it out before our episode next week when we review it. So, thank you all for watching, listening. We had a lot of people pick up on the Best Act 1 finales episode last week. So, thank you. Not a lot of people dropped in the comments what your favorite Act 1 finales are. So, go do that on YouTube. And then make sure you like, comment, follow, subscribe, all that stuff. We have a TikTok. Post on there occasionally some videos. It was gone. It's back. It was gone for a whole, like, maybe 12 hours. But thank you all. Love you all. Don't forget to go down once more. Later.